Is this the most shocking one ever? Serena Williams 2 wins away from the calendar year slam at the 2015 U.S. Open, loses to Italy's Roberta Vinci in the semis, and then, of course, Vinci would lose to fellow Italian Flavia Pannetta in the final. With that, we are pleased to welcome Hall of Famer, U.S. Open champion, and Tennis Channel contributor Andy Roddick to the show once again for his Monday visit. Great to see you, Andy. Curious what you think of this countdown of upsets. Do you agree with the Serena upset by Vinci being number one?
Yeah, and I've actually disagreed with a couple of points on the list just because it didn't take in form going into an event. Like the Sampras-Bastel match, Pete was searching that entire year almost. Like he hadn't been playing well. His confidence was a little shady. I know we give credit to the Wimbledon mystique around Pete and the whole thing, but you know, at the end of the day, you have to show up ready to play on a given day. So I was kind of more shocked by some of them. But Serena Williams, you had her winning 3 slams coming in, being in form coming in. The other thing is she doesn't win the first set and lose very often. So you had all of these factors kind of with Serena, history at the venue, experience, everything you would want was in Serena's corner. And nothing about the Vinci win, besides her just playing a very smart strategic match and kind of using what she had, made any sense. So I'm not mad at anyone who thinks that's one of the biggest ones ever.
Andy, that's an interesting point. You bring up Basel and Sampras. You know, the interesting thing there for me to counter to that is that if you take Pete Summer as well, going into the U.S. Open, you know very well, not very good. Losing to guys like Wayne Arthurs, I mean, obviously a great serve and so forth. But when you compare him to the great Pete Sampras, and then he was able to just tap in one last time, as you know very well, at the U.S. Open. So for me, you know, it's at number 5, but I think when you really think about what George Bastel was, the type of player he was on grass, that one could have maybe shifted up a couple of spots because, you know, Pete, of course, 7-time champ, the big serve, the court speed had started to change a little bit. But I think there were just so many factors that went into him ultimately losing that match.
Yeah, and I think you leave the friendly confines of center court after you've been playing there for, 12 straight years. I think stuff like that matters. But I guess my only point is where you look at someone like a Rafa who won everything coming in, and obviously Soderling is a completely different caliber player than a George Bastel. I would actually say that the Duhan upset might be more shocking to me, at least, with Becker having won Queens a couple of weeks earlier and had beaten Duhan comfortably than a Bastel. But I hear you on all things Pete and Bastel. It doesn't make sense. I'm just putting it against kind of all-time upsets like a Laurie McNeil against Steffi Graf or a Vinci taking out Serena on home turf. But I'm not mad at you for thinking that Sampras should beat Bastel at Wimbledon.
Let me circle you back to number 10 on the list, Andy, which was Chang's upset over Lendl, round of 16 at the 89 French Open. And that, I guess, could be considered shocking on a couple different levels. Obviously, the match itself, given how dominant a number 1 Lendl was at the time and what an imposing figure he was, but also in the bigger picture, Andy, the fact that it was Chang and not Pete and not Courier and not Andre to be the first American to break through to slam.
Yeah, but again, we can't look back with a lens of knowing what we knew happened after that, right? Chang went on to become a top 25 male player ever. And I think the cramping and the thing, but, this was a huge upset, but the guy went on to win the tournament. So I don't know how much of an upset it could be as far as shock value when the guy went and delivered similar to a Krajicek beating Pete at Wimbledon. That's another reason why the Ashe over Connors situation, Ashe had won slams at that point, so that probably wouldn't be amongst my biggest upsets of all time. Huge upset, and I get the context and everything, but Michael Chang went on to be one of the best players that we've seen, and he's a Hall of Famer. So I kind of give more credit to old Petey Duhan, rest in peace, over Becker at the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think this one reverberates for me just because I was very close to it, having grown up with Chang, Sampras, Courier, Agassi, all these guys. And I think it goes a little bit longer because his win there, not just that match, but as you mentioned, Andy, going on to win the title, having known Jim and Andre very well at that time, it was a different type of mindset to actually believe that you could challenge those icons. And you can speak to that when you first came on tour. But those guys are very intimidating, and to go all the way and win a Grand Slam at a young age, I think ultimately Michael deserves a lot of credit for paving the way. Obviously, Pete the following year 1990 took the U.S. Open, and then we had a number of Americans winning titles with Courier following, Agassi following. So I think it was a huge upset. Maybe not so much tennis-wise, as you mentioned, Andy. This is one of the all-time great American players. And as you mentioned, he went on to win the tournament. But when you just isolate that one match, down 2-0 playing Lendl, who's, Chang had played him a year earlier, and Lendl told him, and you know Lendl just as well as I do, he told him, you have nothing to hurt me. You have no first serve, and equally, you have absolutely no second serve, no weapons. And that's how Lendl was. He was a blunt guy, and he'd tell you to his face that he would destroy you. So, to overcome those barriers was pretty special in my mind by Michael.
And I'd say, I mean, you mentioned him delivering first in that belief system. Well, if the other three, Sampras, Jim Courier, who won in 91 for the first time, and then Andre is sitting at home and Chang goes through and wins this tournament, they're going, oh, wait a minute. Okay, so now's our time to be the best players in the world. This is where we make a move. And I'll speak about kind of the jealousy pressures of your peers being beneficial over and over and over again. I like a little healthy jealousy, and it because you were with all these guys. This is your generation, but as you are much older than I am. I think
how much older? There was one too many muches in there. One too many muches.
To be fair, your hair is much younger, but your body is a little bit older. But I think Chang actually did all these guys a favor by getting through and creating that belief system, not just with himself, but for the other young Americans at that moment in time. I completely am a buyer of developing a healthy jealousy.
Andy, you obviously had success early in your career, so you were a favorite a whole lot more than you were an underdog. That said, what's the upset in your career that you consider the biggest, the one that you're proudest of that you pulled off?
I thought of two. One was 0-1 in Miami against Pete. I think I was ranked 140 in the world at the time, and he was ranked 3. And so for me, similar to what Mark was just saying, getting rid of the cobwebs because you idolize someone and actually go to work is a hard thing to do. And my last year on tour, when I was playing I was playing horrendously, and I spent my entire life playing really well and not beating Roger. And for like a 2-week stretch, I beat him in an EXO and beat him in Miami. I was losing to everyone else and just beating Roger. So I don't know, you explain it to me. I don't know how the hell it all works.
The bizarro world finally took effect for Andy in that very last stage of his career.